Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hi, I'm Oliver.
And hi, I'm Lily.
You're listening to Science in Easy English. And today we're starting with one simple question. Does a bigger brain make you smarter?
Right, which sounds like an easy yes or no, but it really isn't.
No, not at all. So welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to completely unpack this. We've got a massive stack of sources for you today. We're talking evolutionary biology research, meta-analyses of MRI scans, genomic studies, and some honestly mind-bending neurobiology papers.
Yeah, the mission for this deep dive is really to untangle this, incredibly messy relationship between brain size, structure, and actual intelligence.
Because we have to move past those old myths to figure out what physically makes a brain smart,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And how your brain is actually optimizing itself. But to really understand how we measure intelligence today, we first have to look at our historical obsession with proving humans have the biggest brains.
Oh, totally. The human ego problem.
Exactly. Historically, we just wanted to link absolute massive brain size directly to high intelligence. Because if you look at a bodybuilder, muscle size equals physical power. So big brain must equal big thoughts. But what's the problem there?
Well, the problem is whales and elephants.
Right.
If absolute size is the only metric, human beings are way down the intellectual food chain. An adult elephant's brain can weigh up to 5 kilograms. A sperm whale is pushing 10 kilograms.
Wow.
Yeah, and the average human brain sitting inside your skull right now, it's roughly 1.3 to 1.4 kilograms. So the math just didn't support the human ego.
Right. Scientists absolutely hated that.
Yeah.
So they pivoted, right? They said, okay, it's not absolute size, it's relative brain size. The ratio of your brain to your body mass.
Which completely backfired on them again.
Yeah, it really did. Because the human brain is about 2% of our total body volume. But if you look at birds or small mammals like the tree shrew.
Oh, the shrew is the best example.
Right. Their brains make up like 10% of their tiny little body weight.
Yeah.
So by that metric, the shrew is the ultimate biological genius.
Which is funny, but obviously doesn't map to reality. So in 1973, this researcher, Harry Jarrison, steps in and develops a third metric, the encephalization quotient, or EQ.
Right, the EQ.
Yeah, and EQ is essentially this predictive mathematical ratio. It takes the actual weight of an animal's brain and compares it to the predicted brain weight for a generic animal of that exact same body size.
And they use cats as the baseline, right? Like a cat has an EQ of exactly 1.
Exactly. Cats are the baseline. And under this new, highly specific formula, humans score this massive 7.4 to 7.8.
Finally.
Yeah.
We found a math problem we can win.
Right. We're the undisputed champions. But the sources point out this massive biological flaw in the EQ. If you compare capuchin monkeys and gorillas.
Oh, yeah. Gorilla problem.
Yeah. According to EQ, the tiny capuchin scores way higher than the massive gorilla. But if you actually test them on cognition and memory, the gorilla easily outperforms the capuchin.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if the gorilla is demonstrably smarter, what is the math getting wrong? Like, why does the capuchin win on paper?
It's the diet, literally the gut. Gorillas eat massive amounts of tough leaves, so they evolve these huge, heavy digestive tracts to process them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the EQ formula just looks at all that heavy gut weight and assumes the gorilla should have a proportionally gigantic brain. When it doesn't, its score just tanks. Whereas capuchins eat high-energy fruit, they're lean, so they get a higher score just for having less body fat.
So it's basically a math trick getting confused by digestion. It's kind of like comparing a modern 2-kilogram laptop to one of those massive 1980s supercomputers that took up an entire room.
That's a great way to think about it.
Right, because the laptop is tiny, but it holds infinitely more information. Raw size just completely misses the point of processing quality.
Exactly. And if we want to find out what actually drives that quality, we have to look closer. We have to look at the microscopic building blocks, the neurons.
Right, the actual processors. And there's this incredible research in our sources from neuroscientist Susanna Herculano-Husel. She figured out a way to literally count brain cells by dissolving the tissue into this brain soup.
Brain soup, yeah. It sounds gross, but it was revolutionary.
Totally. Because she proved that the human brain isn't some magical outlier. It's just a linearly scaled up primate brain.
Right, and what's fascinating here is that linearly scaled up primate brain phrase, because it completely breaks the rules of most other mammals.
How so?
Well, in most animal orders, like rodents, there's this rigid scaling law. As their brains get bigger over evolution, the individual neurons actually swell up and get physically larger.
Wait, why do the cells get bigger just because the brain does?
It's basically a cabling issue. If the brain is physically wider, a neuron has to send its electrical signal a much longer distance. So the physical cable, the axon, has to be thicker to carry the charge, which makes the whole cell balloon in size.
Oh, so if the cells are swelling up, you could fit progressively fewer of them into a given space.
Exactly. You lose packing density. But primates break this rule. Primate brains are incredibly economical. Neuron size stays relatively constant even as the brain gets bigger.
So it's a packing game.
Yeah. Evolution kept primate neurons small and densely packed. They rely on local networks instead of these sprawling long-distance cables.
And that is why humans managed to cram 15 billion cortical neurons into our skulls.
Right.
Like, we have vastly more processing units than an elephant, despite the elephant having a much heavier brain.
Right. It's like we have a 4K ultra high definition screen packed into a small monitor, and the elephant has a giant billboard with way fewer pixels.
But, I mean, there's a serious biological bill to pay for 15 million processors, right?
Yeah.
Those neurons are starving for energy.
Oh, they create a massive energy crisis for the body. The human brain is only about 2% of your body mass, right? But it consumes roughly 20% of your daily energy intake,
100%. Just for the brain.
just to keep the lights on.
So how did we afford that? Evolutionarily speaking, where did early humans get the energy budget to run that processor?
Well, for a long time, the accepted consensus was the expensive tissue hypothesis. Aiello and Wheeler proposed that evolution is a zero-sum game. To afford a bigger brain, we had to shrink another expensive organ.
Let me guess. The gut again?
Yep, the gut. They argued we traded our long digestive tracts for higher thought.
Okay, but looking at the sources, that theory actually got challenged pretty hard recently.
It did, by experimental mice, of all things.
Right. Researchers took laboratory mice and bred them for a high basal metabolic rate. Like, they bred mice to just naturally burn a ton of energy.
And you'd think, under the old hypothesis, they'd have to sacrifice something.
Exactly. But they didn't. These high BMR mice actually evolved bigger digestive tracts, and they performed better on cognitive tests. Their brains didn't change size, but they got smarter and got bigger guts.
So there was no strict trade-off.
Right. The implication is that early mammals maybe just ramped up their overall energy intake, like eating more meat or cooking food, which boosted their brain plasticity. Evolution just found a different pathway.
But you know what's really wild about brain metabolism?
Right.
Even though the physical structure of the brain is incredibly expensive to maintain, the actual act of thinking is metabolically cheap.
Okay, that makes zero sense to me. Taking a 3-hour math exam has to burn more calories than just sitting on the couch, right?
You'd think so, but no. Our brains are so highly optimized that solving a complex puzzle barely registers as a blip in energy use compared to just resting.
So why is the baseline cost so high if the thinking itself is cheap?
Because your brain is essentially an idling sports car.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, maintaining the voltage across 15 billion neurons, pumping sodium and potassium ions back and forth just so they're ready to fire, that takes 99% of the energy budget.
So engaging them to do a math problem is just tapping the gas pedal a tiny bit.
Exactly. The heavy lifting is just keeping the engine running.
Okay, so we've got this incredibly dense, energy-hungry engine. But intelligence isn't just dumping neurons into a skull. It's about the architecture, right?
Yeah.
How it's wired, the white and gray matter.
Right. Let's talk about the cabling. White matter acts as the brain's communication network. It's made of axons wrapped in myelin.
Which is like basically biological electrical tape.
Pretty much, it insulates the wire. Without that myelin, the electrical signal would just leak into the surrounding tissue and dissipate.
And the sources say thicker white matter, especially in the corpus callosum, means faster processing.
Yes. And then you have the gray matter, the actual processing centers. Studies show a huge correlation between intelligence and gray matter in the frontal and parietal lobes. It's called the parieto-frontal integration theory, or PFIT.
PFE, right.
It means intelligence isn't just one smart spot in your brain. It's about how well your frontal lobe, the decision maker, can pull sensory data from the parietal lobe and integrate it.
But the architecture isn't just the white and gray matter. Here's where it gets really interesting. The sources dive into the actual folding of the brain, the wrinkles.
Oh, the gyrification, yes. The local gyrification index measures how wrinkled the brain is, and it correlates super reliably with the G factor, or general intelligence.
Because it packs more surface area into the skull, right? That's the basic high school biology explanation.
Yes, but it goes way beyond just surface area. This is my favorite part of the neurobiology papers, aphaptic coupling.
Right, the aphaptic coupling. It sounds like sci-fi.
It really does. So when the cortex folds deeply, it brings adjacent ridges, the gyri, super close together. The gaps between them, the sulcal gaps, can be less than 2 millimeters wide.
Okay.
And this creates aphaptic hotspots. Because when an electrical signal fires down a neuron on one fold, it generates a tiny electromagnetic field. And because the next fold is so physically close,
It jumps the gap.
yes, the electromagnetic field couples across the fold. It alters the voltage of neurons on the other side without needing a physical synaptic connection.
Wow. So our brain wrinkles are acting like tiny Wi-Fi antennas.
Exactly.
Just broadcasting signals wirelessly across the folds of our brain. That is wild.
It is. It drastically enriches computing power without the body needing to build extra physical cables.
Okay, but I have to push back here for a second. We've been talking all about adding things. Adding dense primate neurons, adding myelin insulation, adding cortical folds for wireless signals. But some of these sources explicitly say that losing brain matter makes you smarter.
Yes. Welcome to the less is more paradox.
How does deleting parts of your brain make it better?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's all about synaptic pruning. Your brain enforces a ruthless use it or lose it policy.
Use it or lose it.
From about age 2 all the way into your late 20s, your brain is actively pruning away unused synapses.
But how does it know what to delete? Like, what's the mechanism?
It's heavily genetic. There's this C4 gene that acts like a molecular tagging system. It puts a chemical tag on synapses you aren't using.
Like a sticky note saying, trash this.
Basically, yeah. And then these immune cells, the microglia, come around, read the tags, and physically engulf and digest the connections.
That is brutal. But it's just decluttering. It's like deleting old apps off your phone so the operating system stops freezing and runs faster.
That's exactly it. And it leads to the neural efficiency hypothesis. When they put really smart people in fMRI machines and give them a moderate task, their brains actually light up less than average.
Oh, wow. Because they have less glucose metabolism happening.
Right. Their brains are so heavily pruned and efficient that they just block out interfering information. The signal takes the superhighway.
But when that pruning breaks down, things go wrong, right? Like the sources link pruning failures to some serious conditions.
Unfortunately, yes. Autism is strongly associated with underpruning. The brain doesn't delete enough synapses, which creates a hyperconnected network that struggles to filter out sensory noise.
Which leads to sensory overload.
Exactly. And on the flip side, schizophrenia is linked to overpruning, where the immune cells aggressively delete essential pathways in late adolescence.
It's such a delicate balance. But okay, let's pull all of this together. We've talked about density, the biological Wi-Fi across the wrinkles, the immune cells eating unused synapses. But looking at the massive genomic studies here, we really can't ignore the fact that overall brain volume does still matter.
Oh, you can't ignore the math. You just can't.
Right. There's this huge meta-analysis by Peachnig, over 8,000 individuals, and it confirmed a moderate but totally undeniable correlation between brain volume and IQ.
Yeah, the correlation is around 0.24, which accounts for about 6% of the variance in intelligence.
So volume plays a role. But we always hear correlation doesn't equal causation. Do smart genes just happen to build big brains, or does a big brain actually cause you to be smarter?
Well, the recent GWS Data Genome-Wide Association studies looked at the DNA of hundreds of thousands of people.
Just scanning letter by letter.
Exactly. And they found a strong genetic correlation between intracranial volume and years of education. But they went a step further using this tool called the latent causal variable method.
Right, I saw that. What exactly does that tool do?
It basically looks at the genetic overlap and asks, is gene A causing trait B, or are they just neighbors on the DNA strand? And they found a genetic causality proportion of 0.72.
Wow, 72%.
Yeah. Meaning the specific genes that build a physically larger biological framework in your skull do indeed have a causal effect on driving higher intelligence.
So what does this all mean? If I'm synthesizing this right, raw volume is the baseline. It's the giant hard drive you need just to install the operating system.
Right. It's the physical canvas.
But the actual software that makes you smart, that's the ultra-dense primate neurons. It's the electromagnetic leaps across the brain folds. And it's the ruthless pruning of the connections you aren't using.
You absolutely need the physical volume as a foundation, but the structural organization and the efficiency, that's what ultimately dictates human cognition.
Which perfectly brings us back to where we started. Your brain is not a bicep. Human cognitive superiority isn't just about having the biggest brain on the block. The whales still win that game.
They do.
For you listening right now, your intelligence relies on this incredibly economical, energy-efficient, heavily folded, and ruthlessly pruned primate network.
And this raises an important question, I think.
What's that?
Well, if human intelligence relies so heavily on that use it or lose it synaptic pruning, what happens to our physical brain networks now that we offload so much of our cognition to technology?
Oh, man. You mean our phones? AI.
Yeah. We offload our spatial navigation to GPS. We offload our memory to search engines. We're offloading critical thinking to artificial intelligence.
So if we stop firing those specific pathways,
Will our C4 genes just tag those networks for disposal? Will our brains ruthlessly prune those abilities away? Like, are we fundamentally changing the biological architecture of human intelligence right now?
that is a genuinely terrifying but fascinating thought to leave on.
Yeah.
Are your daily habits physically rewiring your mind this very second? Probably. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Challenge yourself today. Leave the phone in your pocket, try navigating without GPS, and keep those physical neural networks firing. We'll see you next time.